Thank you, everyone, for coming. I also want to thank Knockdown Center for providing this lovely space today. My name is Luna. I work with Get Artists Paid, which is a fluid organization comprised of artists and organizers who are working through questions of sustainable futurity and payment and compensation. So welcome. So last November, Ada and I started conversations around getting artists paid and why corporations were exploiting us as artists, specifically artists of color. And we had a lot of conversations with a lot of different people in our communities, but we also started questioning what happens after artists get paid, specifically around the fact that a lot of us, when we get paid, it's from corporations that a lot of us don't support and who are complicit in a lot of the themes that we're critiquing in our art and in our organizing. So today we wanted this whole event to surround questions of, work through questions of resource lending and sharing and collaborating, but also thinking through solutions for how we can collaborate together in order to get paid in a sustainable way, in a way that doesn't feel gross to us. So I wanted to start with acknowledging the fact that today we're sitting on Lenape land, and this land, this whole country was built on stolen land and stolen labor. And so thinking through the idea that a lot of us know that, are very aware of that, and are struggling against this and resisting this in a lot of the work we do, yet we still aren't getting paid, and a lot of us don't own land, and a lot of us are still struggling with just surviving. And so we're thinking, we're working really hard, but we still aren't able to support our communities in the way that we want to. So today I brought together 4 beautiful femmes who I really respect, and I wanted to think through these issues with them. So we're gonna have a panel, and then afterwards we're gonna open up this conversation to everyone here, and together have a more open dialogue and have questions, and also solution sharing. So yes, I'll start with introducing everyone. The far left, Nati Linares. As a longtime cultural advocate and artist organizer, Nati Linares creates visibility for independent artists of color who are rebalancing the world. Hailing from Staten Island, New York City, and raised by an immigrant Cuban mother and Colombian father, she is a digital nomad splitting her time between New York City and Western Mass. With over a decade in the music business, working with artists from Manu Chao to Bomba Estéreo to Los Racas y Zuzuka Poderosa, and festivals like New York City's Summer Stage, Santiago de Cuba's Manana, and the Afro-Latino Festival of New York City. She's worn various hats as a manager, producer, publicist, organizer, promoter, and more. She's also a proud collective member of Sacramento, California's Soul Collective, a center dedicated to arts, cultural, and activism. Natalia now works with New Economy Coalition to find sustainable alternatives to our world's economic systems. To her right is Tsige Tafesse. The Seattle-bred, Brooklyn-based organizer, Tsige creates healing spaces where people can learn and activate together. A performance artist, organizer, programmer, and multimedia journalist, Tsige wears many hats in order to do the critical work that keeps our communities active and moving. She's a co-producer of the Prismatic podcast and Archive of Knowledges, and a co-founder of BUFU, By Us, For Us, a decentralized documentary and collaborative project on pan-Black, pan-Asian cultural and political relationships. Since last spring, BUFU has done programming around New York City that decentralizes whiteness and brings criticality to healing spaces, reclaiming the work people of color do in an honest and soft process. And then to her right is Barbara. Barbara Calderón is a Tejana artist, organizer, and writer based in Brooklyn. A founding member of Colectiva Cosmica, she was educated in Austin as a journalist before getting her master's degrees in library science and art history. The work Barbara does confronts social movements, contemporary feminism, Chicana studies, Latin American art, Mexico, and cosmic spirituality. As a curator, archivist, she is intentional in centering women who are often neglected in mainstream narratives. As an artist, she creates time-warped cosmic collages and futuristic chokers under the moniker Sad Sirena. Her journalism is hard-hitting and honest with an in-depth critical pieces about identity, pop culture, and art, like a 2015 article on Chola culture and a recent piece on Instagram sensation Goss Shakira's meme collaboration with Gucci. Her work has been published in outlets including Remezcla, Vice, and Bitch magazine. And then Suhaly. Suhaly, the Earth Warrior, Bautista Carolina. New Yorker by birth, Afro-Dominican by bloodline, Suhaly Bautista Carolina, otherwise known as the Earth Warrior, is an artist, educator, community organizer. Her recent work explores themes of power, Afrofuturism, and memory. Before joining the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute as the Director of Public Programs, Suhaly served as the first engagement and education manager at the public art nonprofit Creative Time. She is the founder of the Afrofuturism Book Club, Black Magic, and has worked in various capacities with organizations such as Art Space, Focus, the Walls Ortiz Gallery, and the Brooklyn Children's Museum. Her photographic documents and writings have been published in Insight Magazine, United Nations International Museum of Women, and Caribbean Vistas Journal. She has enjoyed solo exhibitions at NYU and La Casa Azul bookstore. As of 2016, she is also a Weeksville ambassador and Summer Arts Residency Fellowship Scholarship recipient. So, let's give a round of applause to these amazing people. Cool. So I want to start with, like I said, a lot of us are now in this really intense time, kind of weirdly dysphoric time, and thinking through ideas of how are we going to pay ourselves, and how are we, but also continue the work that sustains us and makes us feel alive. Recently, Barbara, you had a piece in Remezcla that was about the meme account Goss Shakira and her recent collaboration with Gucci. The piece asked questions about why we blame artists for selling out when they collaborate with corporations, and it revolved around a central question, which is how are artists supposed to survive without taking the gigs they're offered in an economy where all of the power players, those with hiring power and money, are corporations? So I first wanted to see if you could respond to that, and then maybe everyone else too.
Thank you. So I guess just a little background about Goss Shakira. She's a meme maker. She's primarily an internet artist. Her work lives digitally online, and she doesn't really get compensated for the work that she makes, yet it's consumed widely on Instagram. And she has tons of followers, but there was no way that she was getting paid for it. So Gucci approached her to do a social media campaign, and for this one-time media campaign, she was hired, and there was a lot of pushback from people on the internet saying, oh, Goss Shakira, she's particularly a woke internet artist. She talks about the patriarchy, bringing down the patriarchy, and she, talks about depression and being a non-binary Latinx person, and she lives in Canada. So in a way, it's kind of, it was, people came out and said, oh, this person is taking money from this really big corporation, as this woke person, it's really messed up. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of us want to be happy for somebody who's actually getting paid for the work that they've been creating for a long time. And so I just wanted to, in that piece, just explore what that means. I mean, that's kind of the central idea that we're here to talk about, is that we're a lot of artists of color who make work that is digital or, even physical work. We're not getting paid to the extent to where we can live off of our art. So, how are you going to hate on somebody who's getting a one-time gig from a corporation? But then we have to talk about what is the extent? How are we going to? I mean, at the end of the piece, I talked about like talking to a photographer from Vice who was considering working for Trump, you know, like how far do we go? Like, I mean, of course, like that's over the line. I think most of us would agree that, you know, we're not going to go that far. But so yeah, where do we cross the line when there are no alternatives? But I mean, there are alternatives, and that's what we're here to talk about. And we kind of really want to talk to each other about these alternatives, but also, you know, get some feedback from you all to maybe discuss and imagine like different realities where we can get paid, you know, in a way that working with each other so that we can, you know, sustain ourselves as writers, as content creators, as digital artists, as, you know, physical artists. Yeah.
Sure. Is this where we respond? I guess I kind of want to first say thank you for inviting me alongside. Y'all are so dope. This is so lit. Yeah, I mean, this is like a really fraught, slippery slope of existence. Yeah, I'm also like really interested after we talk about this some more to like share solutions with y'all. Like I really want to hear what else y'all are up to here in the crowd and also amongst us, because I think we like this space is really exciting to me, because I think oftentimes like we've been like my collective and the folks that I've been working with, it's like we've been learning as we go, like learning through trials and like being taken advantage of in a lot of different ways, and like not really understanding how we're being consumed and why people want to give us money or want to put us on until it was like too late. So this is a really great opportunity, and kind of continuing off of your like really dope article and like the conversation you guys are trying to have. I mean, it's interesting, like the collective I work with, we don't like get approached by a lot of like corporate folks or people who like are interested in investing necessarily in our work, but people really enjoy consuming our identities because we're all like queer, femme, and non-binary folks, and we're like, you know, like cute little like people who like, oh, we're so adorable, take pictures of us and like say nothing about our work. So the kind of offers that we get that we're always trying to figure out are like press offers, and the thing that's kind of, we were talking about this earlier before we kind of got started, is that we really didn't understand how press worked. We've been covered by like every single version of Vice, like all of their little like companies that I didn't realize was Vice. Like what, I don't even know, like there's like Creative Project or whatever, then there's like this other one, ID is a part of Vice, which I didn't know, and then there's just everything. There's so many of them, and they all have written about us, and every single one has written a different thing and like called us completely different things. Like our first thing was like we were written and called like a New York City POC garage party throwing crew, which was really strange because we did throw parties, but we like, it was like during a month of programming where we had like 115 programs and 6 of them were parties. So, and then we also got called, like, we were like curators, so like that's cool. None of us know exactly what a curator does, but we do seem to do things where we invite people to do things, and I guess that means we're curators. And just like all kinds of like everything. We were called a teen feminist collective. None of us are teenagers. And our work isn't necessarily, which is really strange. Like we're all in our 20s. Like it's very strange. And you think they would talk to each other, which is also doesn't seem to happen. But recently we got approached, and this was after Gap put out the call to, I think, boycott Vice. Like it was really recently. We got approached by Chanel and ID did a partnership, and it's doing this thing called the Fifth Sense. I don't know if you guys have seen this. And they're like looking around and like interviewing people and and they approached us, and we were like, okay, well, like we're not fucking interested in Chanel. And also we found out that Chanel like did like, I don't know, like I think they made clothes for Nazis or something, which like it's like the fucking worst. It's really the fucking worst. But also, like, none of us are particularly academic people, right? Like, I dropped out of high school and I'm like scamming my way through fucking undergrad. And we apply for grants, which I think are just as sus, honestly, as a lot of these organizations. So it's like, there's really no clean money. And we oftentimes get rejected from grants because I think we're not super legible academically and we don't code ourselves in a way that is really fun for grant people to give us money. So we were like, we're broke as shit. We're so broke, but we really need this money. So we like have this conversation with them and we end up doing an interview with them and they pay us and we're the only people in the series that get paid for this interview thing. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, like that thing is gonna come out. It's probably gonna be sus because we've never been covered well by them, but it's like the most money we've ever been able to get, and that money is going straight back into our community, but it's like, is that, like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. So that's just to share, like, the spiral of the stuff, because yeah, it's really, really fraught. It's really, really real. And I think a lot of, we've also been really interested in like trying to take on like, you know, like more donations. Like all of our events are suggested donations. Like we don't make anyone pay for anything. But also like it's also really fraught when most of our community is like QTPOC, low income folks, and like demanding of our folks to pay us or pay with us or pay for the things when it's like they don't necessarily have the funds to be supporting us either, and we don't necessarily have the funds to continue to like self-support ourselves, and it's not like. Yeah, and then really quickly continuing that like spiral that I'm on, we also like we've done a lot of different programmings now in like random like museum spaces, and we're about to do a lot more this summer. And people are always like, "Wow, it's like amazing that these like the Brooklyn Museum wanted you to come do this thing," and it's like, no, the Brooklyn Museum did not want us to come do a thing. We like demanded the Brooklyn Museum to give us a space, and we're like demanding all these spaces to like take us in, which is dope, but also like. I mean, like, on the one hand, it would be nice to be compensated. It'd be nice to be welcomed into a thing and, like, have a conversation about that. But I guess there's also, like, maybe that's one of our solutions is we go into these spaces and we demand what we need. But also, like, that's a whole nother type of labor that's super fraught. That's also, like, now I think we're about to do these things with some other institutions. It's like we're getting kind of, like, built into their mission statement. So, you know, this shit is like super layered, and I'm gonna like stop talking because I could just go on. But yeah, the spiral continues.
Does anyone have anything else to say? Because I can continue.
I was just gonna, thanks again for putting this panel together, and for having us. I was gonna say that I've never been approached by a corporation to offer me money for doing something as an independent artist, but as someone who works within two cultural institutions, one a CIG, a really, really, really big museum with a lot of money, and a smaller nonprofit cultural organization, there's still a lot of taking advantage of us that can happen in both those spaces that doesn't look like, that has nothing to do with money. And I think we all, and I'm sure we'll get to this point in the conversation, but we talk about how tired and weary we are of doing this work, because this is the work we were going to do anyway, even if we weren't getting offered any money. So I'm sure that we'll get there, but I talk about how tired I am because of how much I'm doing, and how little a fraction of that is being compensated. And so I think about some experiences that I've had in these institutions where I'm being exploited for my knowledge because it's uniquely QTPOC centered, or because I've lived these types of experiences that other people have not and are curious about, just curious. Not curious about putting any action behind those stories, but just curious about consuming our stories. And sometimes we don't realize how much we're giving because this is just like what naturally flows from us. And then we realize that those same words or those same stories are being written into grants. I've had that happen to me. Like, I've had people in the development department who are like my friends be like, do you know that story you told me about you growing up in Harlem, and like you being like single mother, immigrant mother, ended up in some grant somewhere? And I was like, what? And so I mean, and this can fall into the solutions category, right? Because then once I know that knowledge, I can use that knowledge to be like, did you get that money for that grant? Awesome, great. So how much was that grant? 10,000, great. So that's going straight into my account for engagement work, right? Because that's my story that formed the foundation of how you acquired that money. So I think that there's something in there that I think helped me get through those types of experiences. But my networks, right? Like, I'm an organizer, and I think all four of us will identify, or that some of us will identify as organizers on this panel. And I realized how much just the people I know become valuable to these institutions and organizations, right? And like, they're like, well, you know all the woke POC. Make sure that they're here on Saturday night so that we're well represented, or so that the community is here, and so that we look good. And so I think that I want my Q2 POC friends to be in the room, but am I selling my network for you to look good as an institution? And so that's something that I think about all the time, because yes, I want to be able to get those 25 free community tickets and hand them out, and I'm gonna do that every chance I get, and I'm gonna push to get those 25 community tickets. But at the same time, to what end, and what are the intentions of these institutions and corporations? I mean, we know what they are. And so that's, like Tsige is saying, that's a slippery slope, because we want to be able to do the work, but sometimes we see what we're being used for at the end of the day, and it becomes problematic.
And also, I think something that you're highlighting that's really important is, like, obviously Chanel, and like there's like corporations that are like super fucked up, and we know that, but then like there are like art institutions that are supposed to like be like providing art and like holding, and you know, like other like educational institutions and like nonprofits and like even like outlets like who are supposed to be like somehow providing stuff to us, that are also like run by all white people and like profit off of really fucked up stuff. But I think that also something that everyone's like bringing up is like this idea of like getting consumed, and I wanted to talk about exposure and exposure work and what that means, because we don't get paid for our exposure a lot of the time. We're paid in exposure, but like what we're given like our image is not being paid for. And I specifically wanted to ask Nati, like, you this question, because you've been working with really like high profile bands and musicians for like over a decade, and getting them a lot of exposure, and what that means for you, and also what that means for you now that you are working with like a new economy coalition with like an alternative cooperative group.
Hey everybody. Well, I think my story is that I saw the innards of the music business and the media business, and I saw how corporations were paying bands for these huge opportunities, and I think we're still in process, like the jury is still out of what that'll mean. But, you know, I can give a very like specific example. Los Racas, I don't know if you guys are familiar, Afro-Latino band, have made it in everything from NPR to the New York Times to, they were the first Latino group to have their logo on a sneaker, Puma. You know, this is before a lot of other bands, you know, you see Ghetto Gothic on Nike, for example. Los Racas were doing that like 5 years ago. And then you see, because of, yeah, well, we're not gonna go there right now, but, you know, I see where I'm going is like I've seen the innards and I don't want any part of it, and you see where these bands are now, and it speaks for itself. You know, you have Justin Bieber putting out a tropical beat, you know, last year that's #1. I would say that that's directly correlated with a lot of work that these pioneering tropical Afro-Latino groups were doing a long time ago. So I saw that, and I did not want to continue to get used. It's great. My portfolio is fly, right? New York Times, NPR, that's great. But I didn't want to keep being that person that people went to for the cool tropical, cool diasporic stories. Although, I mean, it's still happening. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the band Chicano Batman. They just did a big Johnny Walker ad, right? So it made, everybody was kind of talking about these systemic issues, and I'm not mad at Gas Shakira. I'm not mad at Chicano Batman. I'm not mad at Los Tracas. I'm mad at the game. Like, you know, when are we going to identify that this is a systemic thing? So this is when I went off and joined Soul Collective, which is a collective in Sacramento that's led by a woman of color, Estela Sanchez. Has been around for 12 years. This month, they just bought their building with the help of their neighbor, big up, 12 years. So it's not sexy, this work. I think a big point I want to get across is like, yeah, you're going to apply for these fellowships, you're not going to get them. Yeah, you're going to be doing these experiments with your group, and it may not go over well at first, but if you're doing it consistently for a decade, 12 years, 13 years, Stella has been quietly away in her little block in Sacramento, grinding, and now they own their space. No one will ever be able to kick them out of their space. They've been putting on artists of color in Sacramento for over 10 years. So as someone who I think is an older person on the group, I want to get that point across, is this shit is not sexy. Community, 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 right? I'm doing a lot of cooperative work now. My job is to basically build a narrative around worker co-ops and like why that is the future. And you know, it's hard work. I'm learning a whole new world. I'm bringing my experience as a cultural organizer to try to tell these new economy people, you're not gonna have a new economy if you don't have a new culture. We need to start networking these cultural spaces. So one of the initiatives that I'm working on this year is finding the soul collectives all over the country and starting to network them. You know, again, not sexy, not gonna be covered in Vice or ID, right? It's communities. You're dealing, you know, you might have to be selling the tickets at the door that day, and it's not sexy, but I think we have to start going that route, and I urge you all to, there's stuff happening in New York City yesterday. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Cooperative Economics Alliance of New York City. They're literally a network of worker co-ops in the city, you know, and they're underattended. Their events are underattended. They need some fly designers. You know, the marketing needs to be sexier to build trust. And so I think, you know, I'm not indicting anybody. I think we're just at the beginning of this reawakening, this moment that Luna kind of referenced of, you know, Trump, all of this moment is just making us realize that we need to, we really need to believe in the power of each other. And that sounds really cheesy, but I've seen it with my own eyes working with Soul Collective. And other spaces that I think are bubbling up in New York City, like Mayday Space, if you guys aren't familiar with, get involved with them. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't hate the player, I hate the game. So let's really like address these systemic issues.
I think the concept of use the media, don't let the media use you is really important. And I think that's what Chicano Batman is actually doing with the Johnny Walker ad. Yeah, because their latest album, Freedom is Free, that's what it's called, right? It's super political. And yeah, I mean, take that money, but you know, maintain your message. Make sure your message is still on point, you know, and go as far as you can. I mean, we hope, I mean, we can talk about if that's sustainable, but for now, like, you know, let's use that if we can. Also, when we're talking about like all of these, Nati and I were talking earlier about like possibly like aggregating, coming up with some sort of resource for everybody to access, where we aggregate all of these co-ops, where we talk about the organizations that are doing the work already. There we go. Directory.
That just came out this week of all the worker-owned co-ops in New York City.
See, all of us should have one of these. Like, we need to, yeah, I mean, I feel like this is one solution. The first solution maybe that we've talked about here that's tangible. Like, let's get involved with these organizations who are already doing the work, and let's maybe, you know, do work, like you said, like media work. All of us are artists. We all do like dope ass shit. We could help like provide some sort of face, because yeah, I mean, you know, some of the maybe the art that goes along with this is not like the most appealing. So maybe we could, do something there. I don't know. But we got to talk about how we can get paid to do that.
Like very small comment, but kind of I really want to like zoom in on this you use the media, don't let the media use you. I really want to talk about like what that specifically looks like too, because I thought I knew and I really don't, and I'm still like figuring out the hard way. Like I didn't know like what you could ask press to like give you like final say on things, or I didn't understand that like you could ask to get compensated, and like some people might and some people might not because of things around I guess there's stuff around, what is it, like in journalism integrity, ethics, yeah. That's real. But like I think like I would love to hear also kind of like, especially if you've worked with different artists, like what you've all done to protect yourselves. Like we've come up with, if you go, I think it's live on our website, we have like a press protocol, and we have these, and I don't know who's gonna read this too, because also whenever I like Google ourselves, like we just find random people who've written about us who don't even tell us that we've been written about. So I'm like trying to find ways to protect ourselves, because we're so, like, especially in this political moment, we're so consumable. Like we are like, gosh, we check off all the little diversity boxes that like they really want, and we're like just that right aesthetic to like really put on. But also like I think it's like, I think you mentioned something about like exposure. Like exposure does not also equal like money. Like it really doesn't. Like, I'm about to be real transparent. Like my gas is about to be shut off, for my food making machine, and one of our members is like like houseless often, and so it's like really like and also we're in nylon right now if you want to read our like spread. So like what, like I don't even know, like, so I think trying to figure out like what does that actually look like. And I think like we're really blessed that we have a lot of community that supports us, not just with our work, but like interpersonally. Like I have a lot of people in my life I can like call on if I need help. And that is a huge blessing, and is the only thing that like continues our work and sustains us, is really, really, truly our community. But like, the rest of it, like we're trying different things out, and and I think it's really, I'm so excited about this type of space, because I think a lot of us are just trying things out and like learning the hard way. And we talked a little bit earlier about like, wow, the importance of peer mentorship, but also intergenerational. Like folks are out here, and I really think like, I don't know about like the folks who've come before and probably done similar work as me. Like yesterday I just went to the Black Radical Women talk at the Brooklyn Museum, and there were like these women from the 60s that were in collectives and talking about how they organized, and that they like, even if they were around for just a minute, like that was a really important minute. And that like brought me to tears, because I was like, oh shit, like right, we are a part of this much longer legacy, and there are a lot of other people on this panel and also in this room that are doing this work, and I have people I can hopefully ask for support on as we like muddle through it. Because if you look at our fucking Instagram or you look at our press, we look like we are so ham, but we're really struggling to figure it out the hard way. But yeah.
The protocol is a great idea, and I think that's something maybe Get Artists Paid and MAMI can shepherd, because it can't just be one group saying this is I think it should be a kind of a co-created resource. I didn't want to get to the solutions part, but I guess I will. There's a media cooperative in Canada called the Media Co-op, and basically everybody who writes and participates in this co-op owns the space. So how can you imagine maybe BUFU being its own content generator and figuring out different resource models for merchandise, licensing? I don't know if you have musicians in the collective where you can monetize that way. I think different resource streams is the way, and thinking about media cooperatives. I'm going to be that person saying cooperatives a lot today, and that's okay. And I will still say that it's not sexy. Like the media co-op in Canada, still forming, 10,000 followers. They have a podcast going, but reach out to Drew over there out in Toronto, French-Canadian black guy who's really visionary around this. And now we know each other, and now we all know each other. And so I think, again, this is a really important conversation to be having, but it's just the beginning. We don't have all the answers, and I really hope that this will be a good launch pad for us to imagine some new shit.
I'm also really quickly, oh, Grace. No, go ahead. Just a really quick response to, I think we talked a little bit about this before the panel started, but a lot of us, because we're community organizers, and like I came up in a lot of activism spaces, like I think it's also like we really aren't primed, I think, for this like conversation around money very well, especially because like if you come up in activist organizing spaces, it's like you're asked oftentimes to like sacrifice yourself and not expect to be compensated. And so I think that is, I think definitely the mentality that we went in was with talking about the project BUFU, like that's what we started the project with. It was never, we never thought about necessarily taking care of ourselves because we were really interested in the political project of the work, and that like drives the work. And so I think it's like, and that's really beautiful, and I think it shows in what we do. Like we really try our best to be as thorough politically as we can, and like the work is good, I think. But I think it's also like we never thought about the press. We never thought about sustaining ourselves and like how that actually is a real ass thing. Like it's hard to do this work and then not have your gas on. Like it's hard, you know, like it's not sustainable. Like it's really truly not sustainable. So I think that is like a part of, I think, this problem. And also as femmes, like I think it's real easy to take on this labor and not expect to be paid well. Like it's real easy to be like, oh, I'm gonna just do this and like not even think about the financial consequences or like the resources that are needed to sustain you.
Yeah, I fuck with that a lot. Bear with me, this story is gonna sound like it doesn't make sense, but I'm taking an herbalism apprenticeship. And it's been like one of the most important journeys that I've been on, just because I've always had a deep relationship with plants, but never understood the science or the spirit of the plants. And just, it's like a reawakening. And the fact that it's facilitated by a woman like a Black woman in Brooklyn who like knows her shit and has done her studies is all the more important to me. But we were talking about the way the class is set up is that every chapter is done through a system of the body. And last week we studied the liver. And she taught us that the liver is attached to your fears. And we talked a lot about fear, and the liver is ruled by the planet Jupiter, and Jupiter is supposed to be the adventurous planet. It's the biggest planet. It's the planet that like urges you it kind of like pushes you out of your comfort zone and makes you want to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It doesn't care about how fearful you are of things. And we started talking about issues of the liver and why women have so many liver issues and gallbladder issues. And it's because of the fear that she's connecting this to the fear that we carry, and was posing the question, why are we so fearful in the country where there's most abundance? Like, why are we working from a place of scarcity and low resources? And why are we afraid that there's not enough for everybody? Why are we afraid to ask for what we deserve for the work that we know no one else is doing? Like, I was telling, Nati was asking like if there was a community engagement person at a certain museum, and I was like, there's not that many community engagement people at any museum. This is like a brand new revolutionary role. And if you ask someone at a museum, they're just now getting on to like, oh my God, the people that come here, they matter. We should probably ask them what their issues are and like why they're coming here. Can they afford to be here? Do they need something in order to access the arts? Is this an affordable price range for a ticket for someone of your income? Whatever. This is like a new day. And I know that we've been doing this work for so long, and my mother has been doing this work and never called it organizing work, and she's been doing it, and her mother was doing it too, and it never had a name and it never had a title. And so we know we're the ones. And yet when we're being asked to do things, it's almost like I can't ask you for what I know that I deserve. And so that's a question that I sit with often, is how come I want to return to myself, not in a blaming way, but in a way that investigates why I'm fearful of asking for what I deserve. And then I want to make a point about consumption. So I'm a photographer, and I just took this really amazing class at the Brooklyn Public Library, who really has their shit together these days. Their programming is so on point. And they did this 3-part course called Vision and Justice that was led by Sarah Lewis. Sarah Lewis is a Black professor at Harvard, which I think is really important to say. And she teaches like art history and photography. And she was talking about the importance of the image in swaying like Supreme Court justice cases in this country. She went all the way from Frederick Douglass and was like, Frederick Douglass was the first person to write about the photograph and say, the photograph is going to change the way you see someone. And that might be, the photographer the artist has all the control in deciding whether you will see that person in a positive light or in a negative light. And that really sticks with me as a photographer, because I think I've stopped creating images because I'm nervous about how they'll be consumed, and I want to be more intentional about what I'm saying, who will eat that message, how that message will live in history. Like, now that we can take pictures so easily and we can put them out there so easily, I feel like we've shed a little bit of that responsibility in knowing what that image can do and how powerful it can be when it reverberates out into the world. And I think about that because sometimes when I'm producing an image, I need to be thinking about putting it in a place that will regard it as sacred as I do. And so I was having a really good conversation with Jessica Lynn from Arts Black. And if you don't know this publication, it's a really, really amazing publication. And I wrote an essay, and she was like, where do you want it to live? And I was like, I didn't really think about that. I was just gonna like shop it around and see who wants to pay me to like take this essay. This is like what we do. And she was like, if the content of that essay really matters to you, then make sure that you'll put it in the hands of someone who will like respect it and value it and deem it sacred. And if you never find that place, then you might never publish that essay. It might live inside of and that sucks that's the decision that I have to make, that choice between it never being read and then like finding the perfect home for my work, because I value the work so much and I want to make sure that it lives on. So, and I think that's another question, and I just keep throwing out questions with no answers, and that's fine. But I think that it's sort of, I think it's something that we grapple with and we really, really struggle with, and these decisions are having to sacrifice something so sacred to you because you want to put it out there for the coins, or you want to put it out there so that folks can read it, and it needs to like, that this work needs to live on, but you have to make a choice,
Thank you. I wanted to first respond to some of the questions, like being a journalist. I think that, and what you were saying, Suhaly, was really powerful, because I think that like something that Gab is trying to figure out is like how we can like literally like normalize this idea of like, yes, ask for money for interviews, and like ask for, I think it was actually on your press thing, like have like you had like have like a person of color write the article, don't have like a white person, and I think that also if you like normalize like asking them, even if they say no, like if we all asked every single time, like it would become a thing, and then like they'd have to start grappling with the fact that they have no people of color writing like in the office, or all their writers of color are freelancers who aren't getting paid enough or whatever. So I think that that's important. But I also, what you're saying, Suhaly, I think also really resonates with me, because I did want to like talk about like how do we keep our work safe but get paid for it in a world that's like not safe. So yeah, if you wanted to answer that really large question, and also thinking through the ideas of how the fact that like it's like easy for us and our bodies to be commodified, like not only our aesthetic and our image, but also like what we're saying.
So I can talk about that, about So in 2015, April, I guess, I wrote a piece for Vice on contextualizing the Chola aesthetic. And I wrote it for Vice, and that was not, my first choice. Well, now looking back, I'm like, oh, why did I write it for them? Because for me, it was a very, very, very important, very special piece, because I was talking about my upbringing, and I was talking about my family, and also talking about just, very big culture that is completely fetishized, completely exoticized, completely appropriated in fashion, in just everywhere in pop culture now. And giving it's like, dealing with wanting this exposure, wanting to be able to, have people read it and have a large audience. Because I was talking shit, I was saying, like, look, this is something that needs to be looked at in a very specific context to talk about feminism, to talk about poverty, to talk about like all of these things that grew this look, what has become a look. And wanting to get like, not necessarily just, it was for us, like for the people who come from this culture, but also for people to be like, hey, for white people or people who are fetishizing or appropriating, to be like, this is not just your hoops and your lip liner and whatever, right? So I didn't want it to be, like, when I look back, I'm like, it did what it did. I published it there, and it did go to a wide audience, but at the same time, like, I'm exposing it to, you look at the comments, and it's horrible, just like people saying such horrible, but I guess that's everywhere, right? But, I had to deal with that, and that's just something that, and also I got paid way more than I had got paid before. But now that I look back, and like, it was like something like 5 months of work, 5 months of researching. It was a very, very in-depth article. And now that I look back, and now that I'm getting paid more now because I'm, more experienced, more professional, it was absolutely not enough for what I gave them, the amount of. And now, they have this, Vice has, and these editors have this thing that they edited and in their track record that they put me on, whatever. And I have very, very mixed feelings about that. But at the same time, I'm like, I was given a platform. I don't have an answer, If I would have published on a smaller publication or, magazine, online outlet, it wouldn't have got the rounds that it did. And it's something I'm very proud of, but, but also, like I said, there are mixed feelings.
So, like, who are we trying to, like, I struggle with this so much, but it's like, who do I want? Do I want to teach somebody when I'm putting these articles out? Like, am I putting this out so I can be like, listen, this is really the history of this, so like, pay attention, respect my shit in the case of this article? Or like, do you think you reach your intended audience? Vice spread it, and like, you think that the people that you wanted it to reach, do you feel like those people got to see it and read it and like, cause
well, yeah, I did. So like, there were people who came to me, it was actually a really beautiful experience for people who grew up in that culture to reach out to me and be like, you did this justice, you told them, like, and you did it well. And I was like, my heart was bleeding, after that, because I was still, an early writer, always learning, to get that kind of like gratification or, just like feedback from your community, to be like, that, for me, it was worth it there, because it was that reception was wonderful, like, but I mean, yeah, I mean, in that way, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, again, like, I think, I don't mean to, I don't want to discredit our work, like, because I think, yeah. But, I think sometimes we're, like, I can be sometimes naive, like, I'm learning the hard way, right? Like, I keep talking about that, but it's really true, because I think a lot of, like, the work that I think I do oftentimes, and the work that, like, I guess I'm talking about specifically BUFU right now, because it's the project I'm, like, working on the most, and it's, like, in my life all the time. It's, like, really specifically geared to our community. Like, we don't think about necessarily teaching people outside our community about this conversation. Like, we're very interested in, like, creating work for QTPOC, specifically. Creating spaces for centering QTPOC. Like, that's at the heart of it. And that's really lovely because we do, like, and even, like, how we present, like, it's just, like, it's, like, for our folks. But I think we've also kind of learned the hard way because it's like, well, everyone can see you, right? Like, everyone can find access to you. And, like, even, like, again, like, when press started covering us, we never really thought about, like, okay, so this is going to change our audience. And also, like, there's a thing, you may have seen it if you watch HBO on Viceland. We became, like, a commercial for Viceland and, like, safe spaces. And it's real gross because, one, we didn't know that's what they were going to do. They, like, interviewed us at the space. Someone else brought this crew. And, yeah, they cut the entire thing about the content of our work and turned us into a very litty fucking commercial for safe spaces, and it's gross. And a lot of it, I'm, like, upset and sarcastic, and they cut my face, and you just hear my voice, and I sound like Daria. Like, I don't sound like that. Like, if you know me, like, you know that I'm, like, upset if you hear my voice. But anyhow, so that's a thing. And if you look at the comments, similarly, it's a fucking shit show. Like, those comments are, I don't live on the internet very often, too. Like, all of my work is really, like, with people. Like, I'm learning the internet the hard way. Like, it's just not my life, and I really appreciate people who do live on the internet, but I can't. So, like, I learned the hard way. Also, like, SJW is a thing, and so people were, like, calling us these things, and I was like, I don't know what any of these acronyms are, and, like, there are insults that are just going over my head. And on the one hand, like, we did get a lot of really lovely people hitting us up, being like, wow, this is amazing, it was so great to see this, and, like, sending us these, like, really affirmative messages and, like, wanting support with work they were doing in different parts of the country. And then we also got, like, we got messages like this dude who, like, wants to crucify himself at our events, and, like, I'm serious, like, would like to show up and, like, do things, and, like, I'm just like, who are you and why is that your takeaway from our work? And so it's, like, it's a range, right? And also, like, the, like, people who are in the room have changed too. Like, I, like, see a huge difference from, like, prior to us getting press and our community coming, and then, like, afterwards, and, like, really strange, like, weird, like, white dudes coming who, like, don't care about the work but, like, think this is, like, a cool thing, and, like, are, like, hipster gazing at my life. And so, yeah, so I'm thinking a lot about also, like, audience, and, like, I don't know how we keep ourselves safe, because I think I don't want to teach necessarily, like, white cis dudes who don't give a fuck about me and my community about my life. Like, I don't. Like, that's not the center part of my work. But also, like, I can't stop them from finding me and, like, consuming me. I don't know how to do that. So I think part of it is, like, I don't know, yeah, we're trying, and, like, also, like, this summer, like, if you came to our space that we had, like, really thorough community, like, space agreements that were, like, really naming what the space was for, and, like, we asked people at the door, like, when you come in, like, take a look, read it, if you have a problem with it, leave. And they were, like, really, 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 really thorough. They were a lot. And that helped, I think, with the physical space. And we also, like, referred back to it. Like, I know a lot of people here probably have used community agreements. Like, it was useful for the space. And I think that's something that we're also thinking about developing as we, this next summer, are, like, entering different spaces. Like, how do we, like, if we go, you know, to, like, the Brooklyn Museum to do an event, like, how do we have these, like, agreements, or, like, something that's physically in the space that says, hey, like, here's what the space is for, here's the politics of the space, like, if you aren't cool with that, please leave. And then just kind of, I work a lot on faith, you know, like, I just have faith that, like, okay, we're doing the best we can. I'm a hope that you're a decent person and you're gonna read this and it won't get weird, and we don't have to, like, have this, like, altercation or whatever it happens to be. But, like, online, that's a whole different world, right? Like, I think, again, like, I think we try to be as specific about, like, who the work is for and what it's about, but it's a forum that like I'm still learning. Like I can do it a lot better in person, but yeah.
How about media agreements? Why don't we come up with a list of 10 Demand Progress. Do you guys know Demand Progress? They have a culture wing called The Spark Magazine that's run by Downtown Boys. Like, let's make an agreement that for the next 6 months we'll pitch Spark Magazine to cover ourselves. It's not as sexy as Nylon. It doesn't feel as good on the portfolio, but why don't we try that? I think I like this idea of community agreements. I think we need to start shifting towards media agreements and being really intentional about that. Not to try to tell you all what to do, but.
I mean, just to respond to that, like we do have press protocol. The thing is, and it's working, it's a work in progress, but it's also like, I think for us, it's also realizing that we can't stop people. Like again, like I'm not kidding when I like say like I Google us and I find articles written by people that I have no idea. Like, I mean, I don't mind it. Sometimes they're cool, and sometimes they're really whack. And so it's also just like, I don't know how to stop people. And I also am really not interested in making the work inaccessible to our communities. Like, I'm not trying to get people to like have to have some like secret password or like know this code word to find us or have to pay, God forbid, to like access us. Like, that's also a thing. It's like, how do we stay accessible to our folks, but also like, yeah, because we do. We have demands like of what kind of people should cover us, and we have lost like media opportunities, and like people have been like fed up with working with us. Like we were supposed to do a whole like video thing series with Nylon that fell the fuck through because we were like, here's our demands, and they were like, y'all are a lot to work with, bye. And so yeah, which is real. So it's like it's hard because it's like. It's a lot easier if you like are in the room and you're like, hey, you're being violent, please leave. Or like, this is not how this space is working, go. Versus like, hey, like here's our agreements online, here's like a really thorough breakdown of what we want and how we'd like to be represented, please respect that. And like kind of hope that it gets respected, and realizing that oftentimes it doesn't. And like also like some people think they're respecting it, like like some people like really truly think they're doing, like they get it, but they don't. And so it's also just like, that's a real ass thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think thank you so much for everyone for talking, and I think that like something that needs to be like more in the front of our minds is like, I like grew up, I've never not known a world with internet, and so like that's so important. And Barbara, like that piece, I like Googled, I was trying to find a thing about why I was like weirdly upset when I saw people wearing nameplate jewelry, and I think I like had messaged you about it, but I Googled like Chola culture appropriation, and like it came up, and I don't think if that was like written for like even like La Liga, which is the outlet that I help run, but if it had been written for like a zine or somewhere where like it had felt really safe and like for the community, I wouldn't have been able to like Google it and have it be like the first or second search that came up. And like in terms of like growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where there isn't really like access to a lot of the conversations that we're having right now, and like access to the spaces that we're having right now, and where I always like felt like there wasn't that much like the pop culture is like weird there, but like being able to like be on Tumblr and like find stuff really easily and Google stuff like is so important to me. So in a way, like being in Nylon, like that's, I mean, like I also think it goes to like we have to legitimize media outlets that aren't like run by like white men, and like Nylon and Teen Vogue are still run by white men, even though they're for like women or whatever. But I mean, yeah, so I think that that's important. And then like also thinking through how do we like recognize that the exposure sometimes is helpful to even our communities, but like working with that and like working through new processes. So this is like the solution part of the panel, because we have like 20 minutes left, but I want to open it up for people and to hear what people say, and also to hear from you guys, like what are your solutions for yourselves and for your own communities.
Well, I'm really excited this year to do this network of cultural venues because I've just even been learning myself. Like in Appalachia, for example, there's a 50-plus-year-old co-op called the Apple Shop, and they're focused on building county cultural hubs. Like, I've never really heard that language before, but I really like the sound of that. If we could start to build these cultural hubs, you know, in Sacramento, in New York, I think like that is a way forward, and it seems very daunting to build that. But part of the New Economy Coalition, we do a conference called Common Bound, and it's all solidarity economy workers come from all over the country and the world and come and basically learn about each other. And one thing now that I'm part of the organization, I'm like, all right, we should have a common bound, but we should also have a culture bound. And these culture bound spaces should be learning from the solidarity economy workers, and solidarity economy workers should be knowing that space is going to be crucial in these next 8 years, for real, and like owning it. So that's one solution that I know that I'm personally excited to be working on, and I'm learning every day. A great resource, one of our members is PolicyLink. And they put out a great report on creative placemaking, and like it's basically a practice guide on how in Appalachia Mountain Tech Co-op was able to literally do community development through arts-based economy work. So I really recommend looking that up. That's a really great place to start.
I'll respond to that. I feel like, I mean, again, like of course I'm like spiraling in questions, but I think we've been thinking a lot about just like autonomy and just like having, like we're like, you know, like we also create content, and we're not interested in like necessarily partnering with any like large corporation or news thing. Like we just want to be able to like have, like we're just really interested in trying to figure out our own autonomy. And it was really great when we had like the opportunity to kind of like demand and take over a space for a minute, because it was also like having the autonomy to do like our own programming and also like actually be able to set the politics of the space. And now this summer we're trying to do like a kind of like a month of programming looking at collectives and collective organizing, and like I'm gonna talk to all y'all and anyone else who's like interested, but and we're trying to go to a lot of different physical spaces, and part of it also is like kind of an experiment because we're like demanding spaces from people. We're like, okay, so like this thing has value and our community has value, and like give us the space, because if you say you're a cultural institution or whatever the fuck you happen to be, like give us your money, give us your space, here's our demands, and here's how we're taking it. I'll let you know how it goes, because like it's also like really fraught, because a lot of the spaces that we're going into have really good intentions and sometimes often like really dope people, but it's also like I don't want to get written into grants, you know? And I also work at a museum right now. I'm gonna be done next week. And like I don't want to be a snitch, you know? Like I don't want to be in these spaces, but also like I would like the resources. And if you say you're out here as a cultural institution, like do your job. So I'm really interested in like how do we, as we enter these spaces, like keep ourselves safe, like really take those resources, and how do we like, yeah, have autonomy? Like that's kind of, I think, at the focus of.
I want to add, like a lot of the inspiration with Soul Collective stuff was I went to Brazil maybe 7 years ago, and there's a gentleman down there who has a network of public spaces, nightclubs, cultural spaces, and it is a viable network in Brazil where he's able to tour bands and artists. Nobody really knows about what they're doing, but they stand up on their own, and they're putting artists on the road throughout Brazil. So I think these are, the models are there. And it's not just the institutions. There's, you know, find the POC-led spaces like Soul Collective. They're not the only one. There's also Allied Media Conference in Detroit, I'm sure you guys have heard about. They hold plenty of space. You know, Stella was telling me a story that she went to a panel about cultural venues, you know, and they went around the room, like, how long has your center been around? And folks were like, oh, 2 years, 3 years. And Stella, you know, in that moment realized, like, wow, I've done this for 10 years, and I have not really ever been connected with other folks. So I think we're in that process right now through these spaces, and I hope that will, please hit me up about that network.
And like, really, I also like bouncing off that, and I'm gonna pass the mic on because I could go on forever. Like bouncing off that and also responding to what you're saying about Googling on the internet and like finding your article. Like I also am like thinking a lot about really fraught and sort of important dangers of visibility. And like I also am like part of the reason we're strategic, like we're also trying to do things at like smaller spaces like Mayday potentially, and like Power Plant, and like these smaller spaces, and also doing things at Brooklyn Museum and other larger institutions with the hope that also people are able to see it that maybe would not access our conversations or our community. Because also like I don't know how interested I am with necessarily like the like dope and important, because again we don't get enough spaces for QTPOC, but also like I don't necessarily want to further like the like sort of like circle jerk of like us in our community in our corner having this conversation, and like that being super inaccessible because of like language and space, and like people just not hearing about it because they don't know about these places. So like balancing all of those things and still having autonomy and resources and surviving. And I'm gonna pass the mic on. So okay, good.
No, related with that, because I hate to keep bringing it to Soul Collective, but they're just such an inspiring model to me. They in Sacramento partnered up with the big museum, the Crocker Art Museum. So they're not just circle jerking in their space, they also produce dope events and are able to get a resource stream going that way. So I think it is a balance right now between getting the coin, paying your gas bill, because you have to pay your gas bill and survive, but also doing the work to live your values on the side. And it's possible. And if this conversation was a year ago, I would be a lot in your boats, because I was a struggling freelance publicist, but through the experience got myself in this position to have a full-time gig, but it's taken 10 years to put myself in this position. So I would say, like, I know it's not sexy, but patience and keep sowing these seeds and these networks.
I'm sowing the seeds. I'm trying to. I work like 5 different jobs. I'm a freelancer. So, I mean, I gotta just keep going, doing my community work with my art collective, Cosmica, and also, possibly writing for smaller publications, independent publications. But I'm still gonna have to take that money from, I'm not working with Vice right now. Hopefully not. But maybe, who knows, I work with Remezcla a lot, which is an independent publication, and I do a lot of my work there. But, if NPR hits me up, I'm probably still gonna do that, I also wanted to just bring up, because we talked about it, a lot of the people in this space here, we gotta talk about, this space, who's listening to this conversation. A lot of the people who are vending out there are not able to come and witness and listen to this, and they want to, but they can't because they're vending, because they're trying to, make that money. So that's something to think about. Who gets to take up space, who gets to listen, who gets access.
And I think that's cool. You have to take that money from. I think that you can balance your participation in all spaces if your intentions remain pure and authentic. Period. If I know that I'm writing for Viceland, but I'm writing with the intention of clarifying something, clarifying a narrative, doing the research, putting the work out there, and I know who my audience is, I think that's a valid, reason to be doing something and to circulate a publication that will get its shine in all the spaces. I don't have to work at these major art institutions, but I set my intentions before I came in that space. What I'm about to do from that space. And if there's ever a moment where you're forcing me to negotiate my initial goals, then we could sever ties. I don't have to be here. I bring a value to you that you need. I bring something to you that you can't have otherwise. And when we realize that, I think that we can move with less fear and more confidence that we can take what we have to a different space and make it echo. And I still do believe that if you have the opportunities to participate in all the spaces, like Tsige, you're making up a really good point about being at the Brooklyn Museum and then being at Power Plant and making it all work, because your audience is going to know what's real from not real. I think that this is what we do. We've always known trickle-down community engagement is something that's real. If a big corporation wants to come do something cute in your neighborhood and you're like, I see you, Coke, or I see you, Pepsi, no thanks. I've seen communities do that, and I've been at organizations where I represent a large institution, and people will be like, what are you here for? I don't know. I trust you, but I don't trust what you represent. So, and I think that it's been an interesting role for me as an organizer whose first intention is the issue and the mission of the people, but also representing a larger institution that has a mission and a vision and a goal that sometimes and often is very separate from that. And so I think, like, for me as a person, like wearing my own hat, like taking off all the other shit, it's like, what is my goal? What is my purpose if I make that the most core, fundamental thing of what I'm doing? I think that, like, whoever needs to hear me is going to hear me, you know?
Yeah, Suhaly. I'm also, like, I'm thinking a lot about, like, we've been talking a lot about press, and then we're talking into spaces, which I think are, like I think it's, like, press, spaces, resources, like all of those things, like those are all really important to, like, kind of understand. And I wonder, like, again, like, I think I've really learned the hard way with press, right? And I think, like, if I knew what I knew now, you know, like, I could have really better protected myself. So I'm also really interested in having more knowledge about like what you're getting into. And I think I'm still, like, I don't think I totally understand all of the ways that, like, institutions work either. Like, I think even though now I've spent, like, maybe almost a little bit of time working at one, you know, museum, institution, or whatever, I'm still trying to understand, like, what is the position of this thing? Like, what does it, like, and I think if you know the good, the bad, the ugly, you can navigate that better. Like, if you understand the rules of that world, you can better keep yourself safe, you can better keep your work safe. And I think I'm sort of starting to understand, like, how press consumes me and how they sell me, and like why I'm a weird profitable thing for people to consume right now politically, and like this image is like a thing that, like, and like also like learning, like, again, like when I'm talking about how all of the different versions of Vice have written about us different ways, it's because they're selling different things to different audiences, right? Like, there's, like, you know, like their ID wants to talk about something else about me and, like, consume it that way, and they're whatever the fuck and blah blah blah. And that's a really, really, really important and, like, useful thing to know. I didn't know. I know now. And I think I'm kind of, like, I'm feeling similarly about, like, institutions, right? Like, I don't necessarily really, I think I'm starting to understand, but I don't think I necessarily really understand, like, what do these museums represent in this world? Like, what systems of oppression are they participating in so I can take care of myself? Like, I didn't get it. Like, I didn't get when I first started working at this one space that, like, what my body meant there and, like, what my knowledge base was. Like, when you're talking about, like, your community getting tapped and, like these different things, like, I don't think I understood that. And I think that that's a really important type of knowledge to have. Or even if I go and we do this work in, like, a community center, or I don't know, we're not going to, but, like, if I did it in a hotel or whatever it happens to be, like, it's like, I think also, like, we need to have a really deep understanding going into these spaces, like, what these spaces are getting from us, and also, like, how they function in these larger systems, because that's my homework right now, I think, in the next couple months of building, is, like, and, like, forever, right, is, like, continuing to understand, like, what are these worlds I'm jumping into, and, like, yeah, what do they really want from me, and, like, how am I participating in that, because only then can you, like, finesse and keep yourself good, and even with money, I don't know, capitalism. Okay, I need to have homework.
I hope you guys are taking notes, because there are folks doing organizing around that. On the institutional level, there's women of color in the arts, led by a woman of color who's a longtime manager who's trying to build that knowledge of how do you work within an institution in the arts. So I highly recommend you follow what they're doing, sign up, become a member if you work in the arts, women of color in the arts. And then on the media side, there's the Media Consortium. They're an 80-plus member independent media network that is trying to figure out these questions as well, and figure out how do we best use that network to answer some of these questions. And then a new organization that just formed, well, I would say it's more like a listserv, but it gave me a lot of hope that this kind of listserv is coming around, is the Radical Communicators Network. which is basically a bunch of communications and journalist folks who are like, all right, we have a lot of power as communicators. And so now it's a very dynamic space going on right now as a listserv. So you can join all these spaces: Radical Communicators Network, the Media Consortium, Women of Color in the Arts. And again, I think maybe this should turn into some kind of document or something.
Thank you so much. And like I said earlier, like, this is totally just the beginning and gap, and all of these people are working on this. And so not only will it turn into a doc, which we already have 100 docs that you guys can all access, but I think a greater conversation that we can have with each other. And I think also one of the takeaways that I have is like really demanding stuff from institutions and outlets, and yeah, all of these things. So thank you so much. Clap for everyone. Again, thank you to Mario for doing videography, and thank you to Knockdown Center, and please enjoy the rest of the day. Well, we're done. We're out of time. Oh, sorry, we're out of time. But thank you. Really, really important.
I just want to say I have a 2,100 square foot space in East Williamsburg that I hope like everybody in this room is like aligned on the same page of what you can use the space for. Come and talk to me and we can use the space for free or sliding scale, we'll figure it out.
Give it to me.
And then second thing, I really need to commend everybody that's any sort of community organizer or artist. Like, I know the weight that comes with feeling like you need to do something for a community and also feeling like you have to be a spokesperson or educator on behalf of the things that you're doing. So thank you so much for that. The thing that comes to mind the most is about disempowering the image in some way. They want you to be using Instagram. They want you to be being on Facebook and like taking photos of yourself, and they want to exploit the fuck out of that. Everything that it is that we're talking about here in this space is about creating new language with one another, and like you even saying like resource streams over revenue streams is what we need to be putting into our consciousness. So like yes to the docs, yes to the panels, yes to more like talking to one another. I hope that written agreements can come in the form of new PR protocol, community guidelines, like it's new law, ways to order space, time, and relationships with one another. So I'd like to meet every single one of you, but I'd really like to talk about the coalitions and the co-op.
And speaking of the Instagramming, they want you posting stuff. There's a really great campaign happening right now called Buy Twitter. And all of these Twitter users are convincing Twitter shareholders to turn Twitter into a user-owned co-op. So if you go to buy this platform on Twitter, you can learn tons of information on how to get involved with that. And I think 2 shareholders already agreed to voting yes on that. So let's put pressure on them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I'm Allie, and I'm one half of Mommy. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. We have tons of shit going on in this room at 3:15. We're going to be having a workshop called Healthy Eating on a Budget. And right now at 3 o'clock, which now is over in the Ready Room bar, is demystifying the commissioning process with the New Negress Film Society. So they'll be doing some screenings of films and then talking about all the backstory of how that came to be. So, Healthy Eating on a Budget here at 3:15. Right now, demystifying the commission process with the New Negress Film Society in the Ready Room. Thank you.